We're going to talk about native grasses. This is a big passion of mine, is grasses. I started out as an agronomist in forages, and that's that's pasture and forage crops. And along the way, back in 1990, I think it was, I was trying to figure out how I can do my course a little bit differently this year. And so I asked myself, okay, what can I do? So I started out the class by saying, okay, if you were here in 1491, what would you be feeding your cattle? Obviously, the answer is native grasses. And so from that point, I said, all right, now I've got to back this up with a bit of information now. So I got into the native grasses. Again, I had a course in my master's program that was way back in those recesses, and I started using it, and it was still there. So from that point, I got into native plants, got into native grasses, and that branched into native plants as the broad waterfront of native plants. But grasses are still my thing. People will call me the grasses guy, and no one is a grasses guy. Grasses are very difficult, and anyone who claims to be a grasses guy is setting himself or herself up for trouble down the road because it's difficult. So we're going to talk about the native grasses of the Upper Piedmont, and while we're at it, do you all know the the plants database, USDA plants database, www.plants.usda.gov? If you don't, go there. There is a huge amount, there's a megaton of information there on all plants, native and non-native. Each one, you can find your plant. You can actually do a search if you wanted to find out what county is this, Polk County? If you wanted to find out the native grasses in Polk County, North Carolina, this database will go through and search those out and make you a list. And the list you get is hyperlinks. And so you click into your new little Excel file there that you've created. You click on that blue word there that says Sorghastrum nutans, and it'll take you to a page or several pages on Indian grass, where it's found, characteristics of it, lots of pictures. So if you're not handy with plants.usda.gov, go there.
Slow down, Bill. I didn't catch it. What? US? What?
Plants.usda.
Plants.usda.gov.
And it'll be your new best friend, because if you're interested in plants and native plants, and it'll also tell, there's native and non-native plants in there, but it'll tell you if it's native. Did we get you?
No, I still didn't get it.
Plants.usda. USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, .gov. And
then it's .org or?
.gov, G-O-V.
G-O-V.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think you need to turn your thing up just a little bit.
Okay.
It's not that, it's the reference.
That goes directly to the recording.
Oh.
Okay. Well, I'll sing out a little more if we need to. That's me. I retired from Clemson University in 2010, and I got involved in the South Carolina Native Plant Society in 1996. We're a 20-year-old organization now, and it's our 20th anniversary. So, native grasses of the Upper Piedmont. Do a little classification. There's cool season native grasses. The ones that get the most attention are the warm season native grasses. But there are some important cool season native grasses as well. The cool season grasses, all cool season grasses, the basal growth is green all winter. Late winter, it starts growing fairly actively. the fastest growth and the flowering and the seed production, seed formation happen in spring and early summer. And then once it moves into the summer, cool season grasses are semi-dormant. They're still there and they're green, but they're right down there, hunkered down next to the soil. They get through the winter, and then they get through the summer. They do a little growing in the fall, get through the winter, and then boom, here it comes again. Those are the cool season native grasses, cool season grasses as a group. The warm season native grasses die back to ground level in winter. They just turn brown, and they'll burn like a son of a gun, which is good, because burning is a good tool for us. So they die back to ground level in winter. They begin to green up in late winter or early spring. They grow actively all summer, and then late summer and fall, this big stem comes out of there. Flowers form on top, and you get seed production. So the most active growth in the cool season grasses is spring. The most active growth in the warm season grasses in the summer. This is a cool season grass. This is needlegrass, Piptacedium avanacea. This is what it looks like in March. Just nothing but leaves there. It's in the vegetative state. Vegetative means it's not reproductive. It's not interested in making any new babies. That's in March. Well, here it is in June. And these little shoots in here, we're just waiting for the signal to send up a stem, make flowers, and produce seeds. And we'll meet needlegrass again. These are the warm. This is typical of the warm season grasses. This is little bluestem. Here it is in April or May, probably more like May. There it is. That's all leaf. There's no stems in there that you can see. It's all leaf. It's sitting there collecting a lot of energy. Well, along about July, late July, early August, these shoots will begin to put up stems. And here it is in August, September, October. It's flowering, getting ready to produce seeds. And when I mentioned it dies back in the winter, there it is. It's dead to the ground. And along next spring, you'll see a few little green shoots beginning to show up down here. And by that time, hopefully you've mowed this dead stuff off or burned it off. And if you do, this thing will come jumping back. But so that's the native warm season grasses. What's vegetative versus reproductive? That's a vegetative plant. It's all leaf. There's no stems in there. There's no flowers. The shoots are only leaves. Reproductive plant got lots of shoots, but obviously it's made stems and it's got flowers and it's in the process of producing seeds. So this is vegetative. Vegetative grasses look like that. They're basically all leaf. Reproductive plants have got a lot of stems, flowers, and seeds. Question?
Yes. How does it get started if it doesn't produce seeds?
It's a perennial. At some point, oh, see, this is the same plant. This is the same plant as this.
Oh, okay.
This is what happens. This is when it gets excited in midsummer and starts going reproductive.
I got you.
Got me? Yeah, this is little bluestem again. And it's a perennial, so it produces seeds. But if you leave it alone and give it reasonably good conditions, that plant will be there 10, 15, 20 years from now. A grass flowers. We think about flowers. We think about petals, and nectar, and all this stuff. Well, grass flowers are different. Grasses are wind pollinated. They don't depend on a pollinator, insect, or any kind of a bug or a bat or anything to pass pollen around. Depends on the wind. And we know it's wind pollinated because there's the pollen source. Those are the stamens. And they're hanging out in the wind. So there are the boy parts, make the pollen. Here are the girl parts, the stigmas. So all that has to happen when this thing starts shedding pollen is some pollen to the blowing by to stick on that stigma, and you'll get a seed. Now this is Indian grass, and that's a warm season grass. This is silky oat grass, and it's a cool season grass. But again, you got the stamens hanging out, and you got the little white stigmas, female parts, to catch the pollen. So it's very well designed to have wind do the pollination work for it. So we could talk all day about the. Actually, I went to plants.usda and .gov and made a native grasses list for Spartanburg County, and it was as long. So I said we don't have that much time, so I picked some. Needlegrass. Okay, wait a minute. How do I go back? Okay, these are the cool season grasses we'll talk about. Needlegrass, there's several oat grass species, some dicantheliums. They used to be all panic grasses, but we found out somewhere in the 90s that the panicums had a lot of stuff lumped together. And so within the panicums, there's some distinct differences, and so they were broken out into the panicums and the dicantheliums. So a dicanthelium used to be a panicum. And then there's some wildryes. There's a couple of wildrye species. So those are the cool season native grasses, and there are not as many cool season native grasses in our part of the country as there are warm season grasses.
Is bluegrass a native grass?
Bluegrass is European.
Wow.
There are some people that think that maybe it came way earlier, and you know, if you go back far enough, everything came from the same place. But Kentucky bluegrass, the annual bluegrasses, they're all classified as non-native. So we'll look at each of these, and then in the warm season native grasses, we'll look at the blue stems. We got a lot of blue stems. Indian grass, purple top, eastern gamma grass, panic grasses, and then there are some river oats type species. So cool season grasses, remember the basal growth is green all winter, active growth begins in late winter, fast growth in spring, early summer, semi-dormant in the summer, begin to grow again in the fall. And here's an interesting additional bit of information. The photosynthesis mechanism in cool season grasses is different than it is in the warm season grasses. Different set of enzymes, and we won't go into that. It's just interesting to know that they do it differently. So this is needlegrass, recognizable by narrow blades, and if you rub your finger along the edges of those blades, they're a little bit rough. Grows, you'll find it a lot in open forested areas. It likes an open forest. It doesn't like full sun, but you go into an open forested area and you'll see these little clumps. It got lots of last year's leaves are down here around the base, all curled up. And this is vegetative. This is in spring. This is what happens late April, May, and June. And it's a very attractive thing. And if we zoom in a little closer, there are the flowers have already made seeds. So it's another name for this is black seed needlegrass. Interesting thing about this is that on the end of that seed twists. When it dries, it twists up. And there you can see it, very highly twisted up. You can take one of those seeds where the on is twisted up, put it on a piece of wet paper towel. This thing begins to untwist, and you get a lot of action going on. It's neater than heck. And not only that, this thing is designed to get caught in your britches or caught in your dog's fur. See that sharp point there, and see those hairs pointing back? When we collect these things, we start out putting them in muslin bags. By the end of the day, half of them had their head out through the muslin bag. So they're active little suckers. And it's all because of that twisted on and the change in moisture content of that twisted on. You can put that. Obviously, nature doesn't do anything just for grins. There's a reason for it. What we think happens here is if this picture had gone back far enough, commonly there's a bend. This thing will go back and then bend up like that. So when this thing is lying on the ground and it starts untwisting, you've got this arm out here, starts untwisting, the seed then moves rather than the arm. What that does, we think, is it gives that seed a chance to find a better place to set up. And if the seed moves around, it has the opportunity of finding another place that's maybe it's a little bit a snugger harbor. And so the net effect, we think, is that this thing is able to pick out where it wants to grow. It's not totally without the will to do something about it. It's a beautiful plant. Look at those flowers through the with sun shining through them. Looking up close to them, again, that's attractive. A lot of folks don't like it though, because you got your dog out in the yard, or you're walking out in the yard in your sock feet, and all of a sudden you've got a little thing sticking you in your foot, or your dog is unhappy because it's sticking him. But that's needlegrass, black seed needlegrass, Piptacedium havenaceum. Silky oat grass, another cool season grass. Here it is in late winter, it's been green all winter, begins to, these individual shoots have begun producing some stems. And I don't know if you can you see the fuzzy nature of the bases of those shoots? No. That is a good identifier for silky oat grass. The bases of those stems and those sheaths are very hairy. Here it is in the seed formation stage. We've all seen it. You're going down a road in June, and you look over there, and the roadside's blonde. There's a layer of blonde about that high off of the ground. That's silky oat grass.
Does that clump also, or does it go by rhizomes?
It clumps. It's clumps, yes. Good question. But if you're going to collect seeds of this thing, you got to be Johnny on the spot, because as soon as they're ripe, they loosen up, and the wind will blow them away. I tried to get the highway department interested in using this as a roadside vegetation plant, because these stems will get up 2 feet high. Tall fescue will get up 3 feet high. These stems, by mid-June, they're all flopped over. Has a weak stem. Whereas tall fescue, if you don't mow it, it'll be there next year. But so I told the DOT people, this is a self-mowing plant. You don't need to mow, but it's a little bit more difficult to get started than fescue, and there is a fescue seed industry, and there's not a silky oat grass seed industry. So habitat, full sun into partial shade. Yep. Keep reminding me of what things we need to discuss. This is a typical Dicanthelium species. It used to be a panic grass. This is Dicanthelium laxiflorum. The leaves are soft and not stiff, so it sort of forms a floppy little clump. This is typical of the leaves and particularly the seeds of the Dicanthelium species. They're individual. They're not formed several in one spikelet. They're all single in the spikelet. And a lot of the Dicantheliums will have hairy leaves. Now this is one of original panic grasses that turns out to be a cool season grass because it has the cool season photosynthetic system in it. And there's lots of them. There's lots of dicantheliums, lots of rosette grasses. This is Virginia wildrye, Elymus virginicus. Looks a lot like cereal grain. The seeds have a whole lot more attachments on them than do cereal grains. If you tried to make rye bread out of that, it used to be very, very fibrous. And this is a typical habitat for Virginia wildrye. Maybe a low ground, it likes low ground pretty much, and partial shade like this. You'll see it a lot of times in sort of open forested creek bottoms. This is a relative of Virginia wildrye, whereas this seed head is about 1/2 inch in diameter. This seed is about 1.5 inches in diameter, and it's spectacular looking. And you can see how it got the moniker bottlebrush grass. And it's a relative, Elymus hystrix, whereas this is Elymus virginicus. And there, if you go further north, you'll find Elymus canadensis, which is Canada wildrye. Again, another cool season grass. Okay, let's go to the warm season grasses now. And remember, warm season grasses die back to the ground level. We end up greening up in late winter. Active growth all summer. Late summer and fall, they're flowering and seed production. No photosynthesis in this plant until it reaches 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Fescue and the other cool season grasses are photosynthesizing at 30 to 35. This thing waits until it gets, these warm season grasses will wait until it gets a little bit warmer before they start photosynthesizing. Thus, they're warm season grasses. We'll look at the blue stems first, and there's lots of blue stems, and I had to pick ones I wanted to talk about. This is split-beard blue stem. Here it is in the vegetative state. The bases of the shoots are flattened in cross section, and so these leaves will come out sort of a bit V-shaped in cross section. Here it is. It's already bloomed and started forming flowers, and this one can be very colorful. It'll turn out. It starts off with sort of a silver green, and then you get reds and blues kicking in as the stems grow and mature. And the reason it's split beard, if you look at that, that is one flowering element. But there are two, I'll get this thing down in a minute. There are two branches to it. So it looks like a beard and it's split, so it's split beard. Andropogon tenareus. Lots of that in the Piedmont. One of the prettiest of the blue stems. Except for this one. This is Elliott's blue stem. This thing, it's hard to get photographs that do this thing justice because the seeds occur mostly at the very top, and you can see it here, whereas a lot of these others have flowers and seeds borne most of the length of the stem. This flowering and seed production is concentrated at the top in Elliott's blue stem. But if you take this thing, take these leaves that surround that flowering, turn them inside out, deep bright orange. So you got to tear it apart to get a good picture. And it looks a little bit like broom sedge, and some people will call it Elliott's broom sedge. Andropogon gyrans. You never see lots of it, but when you see it, by all means stop and get a picture. It's not as big. It's not as big as the other blue stems. It's not as vigorous, but it sure is pretty. Again, this will grow on full sun into the edge of the woods. Here is another spectacular. We don't have a lot of this in our part of the state. If you go up I-85 towards Rock Hill, the medians up there are full of it. I don't know if they actually, by mistake, planted this. If the DOT planted it, I'm sure it's a mistake because it's a native grass. But I shouldn't be like that. But this thing, you talk about your ornamental grasses. Ain't nothing more ornamental than this. Those things, I have, my wife likes to do floral displays in the house with native plants. We have collected some of that, and 5 years later, it still looks as good as it ever did. So, and here it is, just beginning to flower, nice silver green color. The flowers are maturing and getting ready to pollinate, so it opens up and becomes a little more fuzzy looking. And here it is maturing seeds. This thing will get 4 feet tall, whereas most of the other blue stems that I mentioned so far, anywhere from 2 to 3 feet. This will be 4 to 5 feet tall, actually, on a good site. Kind of likes wet feet. So if you got a site that it tends to be a little wet and you don't know what to plant some of this.
Does the Native Plant Society sell the seeds, or where would you get them?
We sell, when we have our plant sales in the spring, we sell lots of that stuff.
There's also a Hoffman nursery in eastern North Carolina that sells these plants.
Yep.
Grass and
Yeah, they do a good job. This is little bluestem again. We've seen it. Here it is in vegetative state, and this one can develop some nice color too. There it is, flowering and shedding pollen and getting pollinated. There it is after the seeds are mature, and they're out there hanging in the wind, ready to be blown off and hopefully make a new plant. Little bluestem. This one likes full sun. Doesn't handle a lot of shade very well, but you'll see it right up in the edge, maybe where the tree canopy cuts off the sun for a half a day. You'll see it there as well. So that's little bluestem. Here's the big one. This plant, big bluestem, is a big part of the tall grass prairies in the Midwest. And so I had done a lot of reading on the native grass communities and tall grass prairies, and I thought, well, that's neat, but I'll never meet any of those plants. Imagine my shock and surprise and happiness when I found big bluestem growing in central South Carolina, up in Oconee County, South Carolina. It turns out that it's in most of the counties in the state. It hasn't been seeded there, so it's a survivor. It's hung on for who knows how long, 500 years we could say. And see, that's the thing about these, one thing, a way to think about native plants is that they've got their start here 1,000, 10,000, 100,000 years ago. We didn't plant them, and if we make conditions right, they'll show up. Now, how'd they get there? There's any number of mechanisms. A dormant seed will not germinate prematurely. We think that some of these native grasses will actually, a lot of them make rhizomes, and we think that if it's in a bad spot, say it's under heavy tree cover, we think that plant will lay there, just will get started in the spring, do some photosynthesis, store that energy in the root or rhizome, and if it doesn't look like the prospects are good to make some seeds, it doesn't bother. And so we think that some of these plants actually may have been laying dormant under forest cover for 100 to 200 years. There's a place in Middle Tennessee, go up on the plateau. There's a big pine plantation up there that hundreds of thousands of acres that they got a huge influx of southern pine beetle. So they went in and clear cut it. Next year, guess what shows up? Indian grass and big bluestem. Now they didn't go in and plant that stuff, and it'd been under pine cover for who knows how long. So,
excuse me.
Yeah.
We have a patch of it that was obviously planted, and it hasn't spread. It stayed in exactly the same, 20 by 20 foot spot. It hasn't spread out.
Yeah. Okay, I'll tell you what's going on there. This thing makes rhizomes, but they're about that long.
Yeah.
So it doesn't spread very rapidly horizontally on its own. Your little plant, and I say plant, not plants, because how big is it? What?
The spot is about 20 by 20.
20 by 20. That's probably one genotype. If you went in there and took sample for DNA, you'd find they're all identical. Just by slow spreading. The problem is, a lot of these native grasses have to have some genetic variation in order to pollinate. They do not self-pollinate. So if over time you got a single survivor, and that single survivor gets a break and starts spreading out, no chance of ever making seeds because there's only one genotype, and it's self-sterile. So tallgrass prairies, some of the prairie in the Indian tribes referred to this as the spirit brother of the buffalo. 5, 6, 7 feet tall. It's also called turkeyfoot, and I think you can see why. Wonderful grass. I've got a tallgrass prairie, about 30-foot diameter tallgrass prairie in my backyard, and I love the big bluestem and the Indian grass that I've got in there. So that's big bluestem. One of the biggest of the andropogons, biggest of the bluestems. Here's Indian grass. This is a wonderful grass too. This thing can be as pretty as any native grass you want to see. This will get 4 or 5 feet tall on a good site. Here it is, late vegetative. It's already begun to start producing some stems down in here. 2 weeks from now, this thing will be twice as tall as it is. There are the flowers, and then those will show up in late August, September. There's a close look. There's what a seed head of Indian grass looks like. Bright, shimmery golden, and in some instances red. Spectacular looking. Nice blue down below, and shimmery golden to red at the top. A good way to identify Indian grass: find yourself a leaf, pull it back from the stem, and you'll see this gun sight. Those are the auricles. This is the ligule, and those are the auricles that clasp around that stem. And they're split, and it looks just ever more like a gun sight. Good ID feature for Indian grass. There are several species of sorghastrums. There's a Sorghastrum elliottii, which it's a little more tender. This plant is pretty tough. I mean, you can mow this, you can burn it, you can graze it, and it'll still be there. There is another Sorghastrum elliottii, slender Indian grass. The tips of these stems up into where the flowers are being born is bright burgundy. Tiny little stem, and it's bright burgundy. I don't know. This is our South Carolina state grass, you bet.
Does North Carolina have one?
I don't know. If you don't, this is a good candidate right here. There's a group in South Carolina called the Grasslands Coalition. And they were trying to see what they could do to spread the word on grasslands, and they hit up on the idea of having a state grass. And you know, in order to establish a state symbol, you got to get your political backing together. You got to go to the legislature to get them to approve it. You got to go through the Department of Agriculture. They're going to ask all these funky questions about, is it going to be a weed, and so forth. And so these guys, they knew I was into grasses, and so one of the guys sent me an email and said, we were thinking about having a native grass for South Carolina. What do you think about Indian grass? I said, any other grass, and I'm not on board, because I love Indian grass. And it occurs in all 46 counties in the state, so that's another vote in its favor. Anyway, this is another interesting grass. Everything's interesting to me. Have you noticed that? This is Tripsicum dactyloides eastern gamma grass. This is one of the most frequently misspelled common names. Everybody wants to make that G-A-M-M-A, and they want to make it 2 words, but it's eastern gamma grass, Tripsicum dactyloides. Dactyl means finger, right? And there's your finger. Oides, you know what oides means? Looks like. So that looks like a finger. Not only that, this part of the finger is the boy part. That's where the pollen is produced. This part down there, that's the girl parts. See the little white stigmas sticking out? So, interesting thing, this is another self-pollinating plant. What happens is the pollen and the stigmas don't mature at the same time. So those stigmas have probably already been fertilized, or either that, or these haven't shed their pollen yet. But plants are pretty clever about making sure that they don't inbreed. They're cleverer than we are sometimes from that standpoint. But I digress. This thing has really sturdy leaves, and you feel the edge of that leaf, and that leaf can be an inch, but can be a half to 3/4 of an inch wide. Feel the edge of it, it'll be a little bit raspy. Cattle love it. This is one of the few native grasses that I think really has a lot of potential for our kind of pasture management here in the east. It's tough. And here it is in the reproductive state. There are those tall stems, and there are those fingers up top, and they all look like that. This thing, these big chunks down here where the stigmas are going to become the seeds. And they're the size of a corn kernel. So when we plant this, when farmers plant this, they use a corn planter. Eastern gamma grass. Another interesting thing about this grass is, for a while, scientists felt like that this was one of the native grasses that the Native Americans used to create maize. Maize is a relatively new, made a relatively recent appearance on the plant stage, and we think that the Native Americans produced maize by combining some of the native grasses and saving the seeds. And at one time, scientists felt like that this was one of the progenitors of maize. That theory doesn't have quite as much popularity now as it used to have, but it's still interesting to talk about. Purple top, we've all seen that. It won't be long we'll be seeing that again this year. That nice red to purple shimmer about 3 or 4 feet off of the ground in a pasture field. Purple top. Another term for purple top is greasy grass. And I challenge you this year, when you see those seed heads reach that stage, go out there and figure out why it's called greasy grass. Because those stems are just as greasy as they can be. We collect native seeds from time to time, and you can always tell that when someone has been collecting purple top, because their thumb and their forefinger are just as greasy as a mechanic's. Because that whole stem, that you can kind of imagine it in there, but that whole stem will be greasy, and it exudes this hydrocarbon substance on those stems and that stem and those branches. And I guess that's to help it save moisture, keep from losing moisture out of those stems and branches. Because by the time the seeds are mature, that grease is no longer greasy. It's just a black residue. Purple top, greasy grass. Some of the panicums. This is beaked panicum, and I don't know. I like memory devices, and my way of remembering this was beaked panicum. Remember the bird that used to sell Fruit Loops? What was his name? Toucan Sam. That looked like Toucan Sam's beak to me. So that's the way I remember the beaked panicum or panicum anceps. It's a panic grass. It's a warm season grass, and it's very easy to collect. In fact, when we go collecting seeds, some of the people rush out there because I'm collecting beaked panicum because it's so easy to collect. River oats. The chasmanthiums, there's several chasmanthium species. This is river oats, or upland sea oats, big broad leaves, likes wet feet, damp feet. And here's the seeds. These flat spikelets contain 10 or 15 individual florets, which means it produces 10 or 15 individual seeds. Now, there's another name for this species, kind of the common name. It's called fish on a line. And you can imagine a bunch of perch hanging on a fish stringer.
That spreads like crazy, doesn't it?
What's that?
It spreads really well.
Yeah, it does. It can be kind of a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you, I mean.
So it does not clump the way most of them do?
No.
Yeah.
No. I've got a treat for you and a real opportunity. Back in 2008, we were invited to host the Eastern Native Grass Symposium. Everybody east of the Mississippi and some people from west of the Mississippi like to get together every year or every other year and talk about native grass issues. And they move it around, and they ask South Carolina, in particular the Native Plant Society, to host this thing in 2008. And so this, and I've got some copies here, this is the U.S. Department of Agriculture Soil Conservation Service Agricultural Handbook number 389. Now you can still find copies that USDA printed and released, but they're selling for $150 these days because there's not very many of them. We don't ask nearly so much for this. What we got permission from the USDA to reprint this in honor of the Native Grass Symposium, and we went through and updated all the taxonomy because the original item was produced back in the 70s, and so it's got 100 native grasses, the ones that these folks felt like had forage potential, and they're found in 11 southern states, and they got a 2-page description, lots of really nice schematics, lots of nice growth characteristics and identifying characteristics. And I've got copies today, $10 a copy if you'd like. If you're interested in the grasses, you know, there's a lot of stuff in there that you won't see here, but there's a lot of stuff in there that you'll find around your back door.
I have an overall question.
Okay.
All right, so we're talking about native grasses, and I know that a lot of people use them as ornamental, so, you know, in their yards, they're just, they're specially. Is there some way to use native grasses other than pasture to replace effectively having to mow your grass
Yes.
all the time. So
Yes.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
most
You can take two different approaches to that. You can turn your yard into a little bit of lawn and a lot of gardens, beds, and grow native grasses, native wildflowers in little mini communities, which I strongly recommend that because that's great butterfly and bird habitat. The people that drive by my house, for one thing, they see a tall grass prairie out there that's about that high, and I'm sure that they do a little bit of that when they go by my place. And also, when it gets dry, I mow my yard close, and when it gets dry, I don't irrigate, I don't fertilize, because I'm trying to kill it. I'm trying to kill that Bermuda grass and fescue and Bahia grass. And at the same time, I'm seeding in bluestem. I'm seeding in some low-growing wildflowers, and I am nudging it towards a mixed community of native grasses and wildflowers. And my approach to that is going to be run my mower up. I'm not going to mow it down 1.5 inches. I'm going to mow it to 3 inches or something like that. And then from time to time, I'll leave strips unmowed and let that thing rest. And when you do that, a lot of these wildflowers that I've put in there will actually produce flowers. So, and then, you know, next year I'll leave another strip unmowed. So that's just me. So that's two different approaches. You can put everything out there and see what makes it, or you can go in there and establish, break it up into beds with a little lawn path in between, and and if you do that, you will have wonderful bird habitat, butterfly and moth habitat. You're going to have more insects, but guess what birds like? Birds like bugs. They feed bugs to their baby birds for their youngsters. So if you sedges are good. Yeah.
Or lawn, I'm talking about, like pin sedge, Pennsylvania sedge or something like that, or a substitute lawn sedge.
Yeah. The grasses, the way they grow, they're more amenable to, you know, you grow a sunflower, it grows out of the ground, it grows from the top, and it gets tall and blooms. Well, you mow it off, it has to go back to the ground to start over. Grass, you know, it gets up this high and you mow it off, where does the new growth appear? Right at the top before you cut it, because there's a leaf in there that never stops growing. You ever mow your grass and go out in the morning and go out in the afternoon and it's grown that much already? And you think, geez, I'm always mowing grass. Well, that's a good thing, because that leaf was sitting in the bottom of that shoot, and when you mowed it, it was waiting to take off. Actually, it wasn't waiting to take off. It was growing anyway, and when you mowed it, it just kept growing.
So would you mow it in the, say at the beginning, or let's say you have the warm grasses, would you mow that winter and let it?
The winter native grasses or the winter?
The native grasses. Or would you just leave it?
You can once these native warm season grasses, once they go into November, December, they're dead to the ground anyway. And you know, my tall grass prairie in my backyard, I burn it every year in March. I burn that sucker. I tell people it's the most exciting 90 seconds of my year, because those tall grass prairie grasses will burn. And I always wait till my wife leaves, because she comes back and sees that, well, Bill has burned the prairie again, but she doesn't like me burning. So, well, that's all I've got. Let's see, one more thing here. We're having the annual Native Plant Symposium, October 7th through 10th at Clemson. Native Plants Connect Communities. This time it's the Native Plant Society collaborating with the South Carolina Garden Club Association and the Botanical Garden. So Native plants connect communities, it connects plant communities, it connects animal communities. It also connects people communities. So that's where we come. Yes?
How does somebody learn, assuming it varies from species to species, know when it's the appropriate time to collect the seeds and how do you collect those seeds? You know, if you've got a massive wooded area or pasture areas that are all native, that type of stuff, how do you go about deciding?
Well, one easy way to do it is just when the seeds start falling off, get out there that day and collect yourself some, because they're ready then. On some of the native grasses, you pinch the seed head just lightly and pull. And if the seeds that you get off, if you got your pincher calibrated, if you pinch it at the right intensity, the seeds that come off will be ready to plant.
So I got to calibrate my fingers.
That's right. You got an opposable.
Different grass.
You got an opposable thumb for a raisin man. Yeah, that's the way. When we take new people on grass collections, that's the way we teach them. Just pinch it lightly, and if what seed comes off, and if no seed comes off, go on down the road. And if the seeds are nice and brown and hanging out there, they're most likely ready.
I just wanted to make a comment to you that Mark Feinking here is a landscape architect who specializes in native plants, and so he can help you figure out the right grasses or.
But you don't want to mow period, right?
No, what I'm trying to figure out, no, I don't know what the mowing is my downtime. so I don't mind mowing at all, but I'm trying to figure out, and I've talked with a couple of people from Betsy George, who is native plants. And the thing that concerned me, though, I was going to go look at her native plant garden, and I was going to go in the wintertime, and she said, oh, you don't want to come in the wintertime because everything is dead. So what I'm trying to figure out is how do you have, because I have a lot of lawn, how do you figure out something that basically, really, honestly, doesn't look awful? It's like, sometimes I go out in my garden, if I ever cut my garden over the wintertime, it looks pretty awful.
But native grasses in winter are beautiful.
Sedges
Sedges and switchgrass and all.
Well, beautiful. And the only other question I had, the reason I asked about mowing, is that I have an issue with copperheads.
Oh, that is an issue.
So, I'm always concerned about grasses that create.
They're more afraid of you.
No,
she might argue that one with you.
They're not afraid because I've been bitten. So, but that's sort of my concern also about having tall grasses.
Yeah.
So I really have a lot of things to have to consider. But I would love to promote more of the birds and the butterflies and all of that.
One thing about collecting seeds, we've watched the wild turkeys go like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Get it off the seed head.
Right.
Just go right.
Yeah. Of course, they're not trying to replant them. They'll take anything that's got some goodie in it. But one idea I might have to suggest to you as far as trying to figure out how you want to go is go out and look at some country roadsides. They get mowed a couple of times a year.
Yeah, that's great.
And see what's in there. And it's amazing what you'll find in there. There's a goat shrew, there's a spiked goat shrew, there's pencil flower, there's grass-leaf aster, and those are just the wildflowers. A number of grasses are in there as well. So just go out there and see what's there. And that's something that we do a lot. Is we call it roadside botanizing, and I'm I'm always doing that. People always come and say, well, I saw you out on Highway 76 the other day. I said, yeah, well.
I don't want to stop the conversation, but I wanted to say, Bill, when we're done, some of those prairie grasses that you talked about, the warm-season grasses, I have planted over here on the side of
Yeah, I saw that coming in.
And people could just walk out
Sure.
with you and let
Yeah,
you talk
yeah,
to them
yeah.
about them. Then they can see them at this time of the year. They're not.
I was planning to get here in time to walk around and see what you had, just so we could maybe walk out and see. Yeah, we'll do that. Yes.
You mentioned you have the bushy bluestem. There is a stand on 74, the 108 overpass.
Mm-hmm.
Right there between the off-ramp and the on-ramp area.
Go out and put landmines around it, because if DOT finds out. I shouldn't be so hard on the DOT. They're evolving. They really are. Someone over here, yes.
Would you say that the warm season grasses are mostly in the open, full sun?
Yes, but a lot of them, like little bluestem, will handle a half a day of sun.
What I find is I have some of those in the woods, some open areas, and I have so much Japanese stilt grass. How can you work to get rid of that? Or, I'm sure the grasses, the native grasses are there, but they're under there. Will they die, or what can be done?
Well, desperate people do desperate things, and with Japanese stilt grass, they make off a herbicide. There is a herbicide called Plateau. You put it out in ounce per acre quantities, but it is very hard on Japanese stilt grass.
Mowing at certain times before it goes to seed,
Yeah,
it seems to suppress it a little bit, but
yeah. This thing, those stems flop over and take root at the nodes, and you're just taking off the upper seed. So we may be stuck with that one for a while. There was hopeful information a couple of years back about a disease, a fungal organism, which seemed to attack that thing, but I haven't heard anything from that lately. Question by you?
What horse pasture native grasses would you recommend, both cool season and warm season?
For horses?
The extension office, they seem to just dwell on fescue and Bermuda. But anyway, I was just wondering.
Horses are the worst client you could ask for. Horses will go out and start grazing in an area, and they'll come back to it every day. So over here there'll be stuff that's knee high, and over here it's that high, because once it gets too tall, they ignore it. And so they'll overgraze over here and just totally not graze over there. So that's the reason. There are no easy answers to your question. If you had enough land, and a lot of people don't have enough. They have way more horses than they have land. But if you had enough land, you could set up little paddocks, and you could put them in there, let them graze an area down, and then move them on, and maybe it's a month or 6 weeks before they come back. That's what a lot of these native grasses want, because they evolved under herds of buffalo and elk and grazers that came through, grazed it down, and moved on. So, see, when the Europeans first got here, there was just grasslands everywhere. Everybody thinks there was, forest primeval from Charleston to the Mississippi, but it wasn't. And so the first settlers who came to Charleston went out in the countryside and they saw all this grass. And so we had the first real industry. People talk about rice and indigo. The first real money was made on cattle, because they had all this free grassland. Well, they brought the people and the cattle came from England, Scotland, where they have cool season grasses and cool seasons, and they can graze year round. So they brought the cattle and the technology over here and put it on our grasses, and they wiped them out within a few years, 8 to 10 years, and most of that kind of grazing, and the native grasses were gone. That's the reason they had to move cattle up from Charleston up onto the upper coastal plain, and then the lower Piedmont, and then the upper Piedmont, because they killed out the native grasses as they went. So it's a difficult question. Cattle are okay. Sheep and goats are hard on grasses, but horses are terrible.
What would you recommend, though? I do rotate my horses like you're talking about. But what is a warm season grass, native grass, and a cool season native grass that you would recommend that you could plant in a
Probably split-beard bluestem. I would plant some eastern gamagrass, because once it gets started, it is tough, and it's tough enough that your horses won't overgraze it.
Eastern what?
Eastern gamagrass, the one with the fingers.
Is Johnson grass a bluestem?
No, Johnson grass is a thug. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a terrible weed.
Yeah.
And less polite company, I was spit when you said Johnson grass.
I have a grass that I call Indian bamboo that is around the pond. It's never gets out of control. It's very attractive, but I don't know what the real name is.
Is it, how big do the stems get?
The stems? Well, you mean
Size of your little finger?
Yeah, about so.
That's probably the native cane. We have native bamboo here. It's called river cane.
Told years ago that Indians used it for basket weaving.
Yeah. And it was years ago, or centuries ago, all these creek bottoms were cane breaks of the native bamboo. So, but then we came in and grew corn and cotton, and we ripped all that stuff up. And so, anyone else? Well, okay.